This is Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search for my site. Text from the New York Times, 2004, Ed Condon. This is a special Father's Day feature. It is a special emotional significance for me. And I read it on the occasion of Father's Day 2015. So this is a decade plus one. The New York Times archive, a nice story about a father and his son and daughters. NYC Subterranean, this is the F train that just arrived. I'm in a local station at 23rd Street. This is the line of the F and M. The B and D also shares tracks with these trains, the F and M, but those are express trains. They skip this stop. It's an unusual stop because it's only the local trains that pass through this tube, and it's only the uptown trains, northbound trains that pass through this tube. So acoustically, once F moves on, occasional F or M. F means not very frequent. M is also not very frequent, so the acoustics should be decent. Again, New York Times, 2004, Ed Condon. Title, A Broken Man Leaves Legacy in Letters. This is a Father's Day story of imperfection and failure, multiple divorces, and personal demons. It's also a Father's Day story of a broken yet stubbornly dutiful man. Story of a broken yet stubbornly dutiful and devoted man. It's a tale of piecing together with the scraps of letters that a loving father kept sending to his children over years of discord and despair from distant locales, both physical and emotional. The letters are touched with encouragement and wisdom, tenderness and sorrow. It's hard not to be near you on your big day, begins one. I was so proud that day you were born. It was like floating on air. Since then, we haven't been together as much as we should have, and that is my fault. But I never stopped loving you and your mother's strength and affection of others. I know you are growing into a fine, intelligent, active young man. That letter was written at a birthday on October 16th, 1973. It was sent from Chicago to Jackson Heights, Queens, by Ed Condon, divorced, unemployed father to his 9-year-old son, Clifford. The letter came some 20 years after Condon's life seemed most suffused with unbeatable promise. Ed Condon had been a local legend as a teenager on Long Island. From there, he had gone to Harvard, where he'd become a starting point guard on the basketball team. John Updike was a fellow member of his class. F. Lee Bailey, that was a class of 1954. F. Lee Bailey was another. Ed Kennedy was yet one more. When their reunion was written about 25 years later, the headline in the New York Times read, Harvard, class of 54, achievers who sleep soundly at night. Ed Condon never slept that soundly. After college, good jobs were lost, regained, and lost again. Alcohol and gambling. 2 marriages failed. 4 children were left. Condon drifted. Call it abandonment or escape. He called it, in his own words, errant selfishness. But through those letters, he never lost contact as a father. Written longhand, addressed with his 3 daughters and sons, and signed with love. They bore the imprint of intelligence and schooling. They're also candid, courageous, and full of optimism, often drawn from the depths of his own turmoil. June 1981, Ed Condon, living in Des Plaines, Illinois, had just completed a stint in alcohol rehab. His daughter Carrie, then 15, had written to him. Full of concern, he responded in the letter in June. The hardest time to write, he noted, is when you feel powerless to help another human being, especially your father. Of course, there was a time when Condom himself didn't need to help of any kind. Growing up on the west end of Long Island, Condon seemed oblivious to pressure. He played on a championship basketball team, won 18 consecutive games. He achieved academic all-county honors. He started in left center for a divisional title basketball team. Years later, he would be introduced to the ranks of Long Beach High School Wall of Fame. At Harvard, he earned 3 letters in basketball and the respect of classmates for his leadership and defensive intensity. He was the kind of player every coach loved. Bob Gersten, his high school coach, recalled last week Ed Condon was married in 1960, and there were 4 children in 5 years. He had his first jobs in New York newspaper advertising. Still, no amount of potential prevented the eventual unraveling. Divorce in '67 sent him to San Francisco the following years as a self-described hippie in a suit. There he sold ads for the San Francisco Chronicle. He returned to New York in 1973, remarried the same year, drove a cab, tried to resume a career in advertising sales. Between periods of alcohol rehab, he completed 2 New York City marathons and divorced a second time. But if Condon felt he was not the father in a familiar and cultural sense, he once wrote to his first wife, Mary, he managed to have an engaging what to do with your life dinners with his children on many Thursday nights. He brought bagels, newspapers to them on a regular Sunday visits. Helped the college selection process and accompanied each one to their first day of college. And he wrote, always. In April 1983, his daughter Jacqueline was 20, was apprehensive about a dinner invitation she had to meet the family of a man she was dating at Drew University. With a lifelong allergy to potatoes as a starting point, Condon wrote, all dinner invitations are anxiety-laden. For me, because I had searched for potatoes in the soup while pretending to chit-chat, believe it or not, the family was probably as anxious as you. I trace it to the fact we're all hopelessly involved with self, and again, some release takes prayer and effort. Before I made a business talk, I would always pray, be able to say, and do you think the right thoughts, developing courage in so-called small matters. It's harder than battlefield courage because this aloofness we feel, the very crux of the human condition. Condon's solitary sensibility, he travels fastest, and he travels alone. He would preach to his children, help when a job in a national sales pitch sent him to Chicago. Your first allegiance should always be to your mother, and you don't really have to participate in any friendships, he wrote Carrie in December 1984 after introducing her to his latest girlfriend. What I mean is you can apply the same standards to me as my friends as you do to someone else. What does he see in her? What does she see in him? Or The best one, what do they see in each other? Divorce certainly complicates matters, but the different perspectives should be helpful. If we can all learn from the emotional tug of wars that surround us, learn to laugh at the follies and oversensitive people pleasing, just stay as nice as you are, natural. Thanks very much for making it so easy to love you. Condon struggle often overlapped those of his children in 87, October 87, while living in New York and selling advertisement for several publishing companies. He was into another round of heavy drinking, futile trips to the racetrack, and flirtation with drugs. Meanwhile, Cliff, then 22, newly commissioned officer in the Navy, was 2 months at sea and discouraged. I'm proud of you, Condon wrote his son, October 4th, and may your journey be long and fruitful, one where you fill out the midst of the worst day and the road, that the road is better than the inn. I'm proud of you, Condon wrote his son, October 4th, and may your journey be long and fruitful, one where you find out in the midst of the worst day that the road is always better than the inn. And seeking more information, crucial part of life. Another letter followed. In reading and rereading your co-decree, I think you're experiencing nothing less than an encounter with the real self, he wrote his son, citing Thomas Merton. He went on, this encourage, carefree, and make you stronger, but you must not give in to the false self that thrives on pride and smiles. And the false agreement at once makes us hard, a charging guy. Still another letter he wrote, October 27th, seemed to mirror Condon's own fragility. Sometimes when you get overwhelmed and depressed, you wake up one day and things are manageable. Notice I said manageable, not rosy, not cozy. Keep practicing those relaxation techniques. You can signal the unconscious and take over. And if successful, you, the big I, can recede into the background. I, all the real and imagined sights and grievances become not so important. They just become manageable. 2 weeks later, 1987, drawed to a close, the Condon's daughter had confronted him at his favorite Long Beach hangout. Shrines, he checked into St. Mary's Hospital in Minneapolis. His daughter flew out late November, and he spent time with him. By December 21st, out of rehab, back in New York, Condon was again connecting. The human race was given ineffable hope by the Creator to carry out through long winter nights. In the cave as an antidote to Celtic melancholy, he wrote to Cliff, so alongside our vulnerability is this amazing resilience, which let us forge ahead, climb the mountain and either the peaceful valley just over the horizon. In the years ahead, I have faith and hope that in living a simple, sober life, it will become ever so much clearer what action I can take for day-by-day peace and serenity. To change his luck and change my batteries, Condon moved to Vegas. In 1988, worked at a sport betting parlor, security at the Sahara Casino, and sold real estate. Advice was sometimes brutal, self-mocking, practical as opposed to mystical. Don't ever bet on any sports that has a ball, which means concentrate on horses. The trainer manipulation, he wrote Cliff to Christine. On why he gambled, he said, you don't want to walk around lucky and never know it. But the luck never lasted. In the early 90s, Condon tried telemarketing, borrowed money from classmates and friends to pay bills, and covered bets. The letters and advice continued. In the early 90s, Condon left telemarketing and borrowed money from classmates. Find your dream and go for it, he urged Cliff in February 1980. That way you'll never experience the type of soul death you can see around. Death by boredom, death by drugs and alcohol, death by too much doing and not enough seeing, not enough reflection. The assorted datelines in Condon's letters include Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Pompano Beach, Florida, Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, Long Beach, New York City, reflected at a minimum real uncertainty. Happiness, there's a rub, he wrote Jacqueline on December 29, 1994, after receiving her Christmas card. It's a byproduct of doing the right thing, answering the small voice within, and somehow knowing and accepting what William James called sentiment of rationality. The candor found his letters often eluded him elsewhere. He found, for instance, that the ability to complete crossword puzzles in minutes, or quote, Walker Percy, and one of his favorite authors, resonated less at Manhattan meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, where Ed Condon became a familiar figure. But his children were good listeners through the mail, even to the hardest news and self-assessments. There have always been a special bond between us. Maybe we are emotionally too much alike, he wrote Christine, 96. What I want you to try and understand is that since January, I firmly believe I was not just a problem drinker and not just an alcoholic. Dad, on the other hand, spree, but in fact mentally ill. Condon, it turns out, did attend and celebrate the 25th anniversary of his college class, and one that had prompted the headlines and articles of the Times, Cliff and Christine. And in recent years, at the class of the 50th reunion neared, he wrote a poignant 5-page letter to Carrie, recounting his college experience and mused, if I didn't scale the social heights or crash the inner circle, I was giving something more of value, a lifelong penchant for reading and asking questions. A Condon essay is the 50th reunion book, but Condon was not at the class ceremonies. Held last week, he died March 20th in Hollywood, Florida, of heart failure brought on by kidney and liver failures. He was 71. 2 days later, Cliff found his father's letter in a box in the attic. He was so moved. He read several of them at the wake and the funeral. Other family members and friends told the children they had also preserved letters. One of them, I treasured them, said Ed Lauder, a childhood friend, Hollywood actor for more than 3 decades. It should be in the Smithsonian. Eddie was our Brendan Behan, a poet, philosopher, marching to his own unique tune. Neil K. Boltz, a prominent Cincinnati real estate developer and classmate, wrote Christine several weeks after her father's death. Christine, 43, single, lives in Manhattan. Jacqueline, 42, married, raising a toddler, twins in New Rochelle, New York. Cliff, 39, is married with 3 children, lives in Rockville Center on Long Island. He's executive director of structural finance of a German firm, West G. Carrie, 38, is married with 2 children, lives 2 minutes from her brother, and is the director of employee communications for Verizon. The 3 children understood their father's shortcoming. His accomplishments were frozen in time, and he never recognized them, said Cliff. And they still tear us up. They talk of his letters and evocative voice. They also respect his 7 attempts at rehabilitation and realizing that finding the appropriate Father's Day card was often futile because of too much sentimentality wouldn't have applied. For Father's Day in the early 80s, Christine recalled recently, we gave my father a desk chair, Harvard crest, the motto Veritas on the back. Though he disdained material possessions too large to fit in an overnight bag, he treasured that chair. Veritas is Latin for truth. Truth is my father. He left no estate to squabble over, and he left us richer for that. He loved literature, introspection, his humor, wit, resilience was his priceless legacy to his children. This text, the story of Ed Condon, is quite possibly the single text that most influenced me and guided me as a father in the recent decade plus one. And this text was prompted to me by my sister. The presentation and the timing all seemed to come together. I say this text influenced me, and perhaps it just reinforced much of what I was already doing. I'll write more about this New York Times archive piece in the days, weeks, years to come, decades to come. This has been Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling and the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search for my site. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, good evening, a restful night's sleep. Ciao.